All right, in this video we're working on Chapter 34, Exercise 3. It's called Connection Dialog. In this one, let's read the problem description. It says, develop a subclass of border pane named DB Connection Pane that enables the user to select or enter a JDBC driver and URL and to enter a username and password as shown in the figure below, and that's the one on the left. When the Connect to DB button is clicked, a connection object for the database is stored in the connection property. You can then use the get connection method to return the connection. All right, so this sounds like it's a pretty simple little thing, but as some of you have discovered from wrestling with it, it can be a little bit of a challenge. Namely, working with the combo box and how it works with an array list to kind of pull back the contents. So there's a little bit of trickery to it. What I've already done preemptively is we are working in NetBeans because we've been working here with that product for the earlier exercise, and that was the 34.1. So I just created a new class file inside of that project, and I called it exercise 34_3. I am going to be pulling in code from a previously built application to kind of accelerate this process a little bit, but while still showing you the procedures for building. First thing we're going to do is we're going to extend application. That of course requires a library, so I'm doing a control space and then pressing enter, making sure it's the JavaFX library. This one here now is saying no suggestions. But what we do need to do is create our main method and our start method and our override. So I'm going to be pasting those in right here. And I'm going to tab that in. Just kind of clean up the code a little bit. And then you can see we have a bunch of things here that are going to require libraries. Let's start with scene. Let's get the stage in there. You can see the stage takes care of the override. The DB connection pane is something that we are going to be building. So if you actually click on it in NetBeans and do an Alt-Enter, it will actually ask us to create the class. And notice this isn't a method, this is actually a full-blown class, but where we are going to create it is a matter of, it's up to us basically. And notice we do have a couple of different options here. We can actually create it as a separate file, or what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create it right within the same application. So it's just going to sit down below. And I really actually don't want to create it the way the program did automatically. So I'm actually going to cut it back out and show you a different approach. But just so you know that that's a possibility. So what I'm doing here is I'm going below the main method, so outside the main class up above, and just kind of starting this new class down below. And you can see that it is going to extend border pane because that's going to be the visual element we're going to use to lay things out. So I'm going to do a control space at the end of that one to pull in the library. All right, and then we have a little bit of work that we need to do in here in order to get this to happen. Now I'm going to jump back over to the PDF and just take a quick look at what we're trying to build. Now remember, the way that a border pane works is it has a center section, a top, a bottom, a left, and a right, with the top and the bottom going full screen width, and the center can go full screen if you don't use a left and a right on it, and that's basically the approach that we're going to use. So what's interesting about the way that we're writing this is usually when we write a start method and a main method that launches it, we'll have panes pre-created. We put stuff into our panes and then they happen, right? So that's an approach that we use. But what we're doing in this scenario is we're actually instantiating this other class on the fly right inside the scene in the stage. So that's why we're doing new DB connection pane here. So it hasn't been created yet. So really all the work of the program is going to happen in this other class that I just created below. Now we are going to need a bunch of visual elements, so let's get started by doing those. And by looking at the PDF, you can see we need this combo box. I'll do that last. And we also need, oh gosh, I guess we need a couple of combo boxes, right? And then we also need username and password and a button. And then it's probably a good idea to create this little label up here too, like we did for that previous application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the simple ones first. So I'm going to come over here on my other screen where you guys can't see, but I am copying and pasting code over to make this go a little faster. So I have created a label, a button, a text field, and the password field. These are all going to require libraries, so what I'm going to do here is control space at the end of each one of these and pull in the appropriate library, making sure it's a Java FX library and not a Swing or AWT library. So those libraries have been added, and if you want to just double check, this is what I have so far up at the top of mine. All right. I also am going to require a connection, and the connection is something that is database related, so I'm just going to drop that up here at the top. If you're wondering why we're creating privates here, because we are actually creating a new class, so we want these to be isolated from the outside world. They'll instantiate in place, but we don't want them to be accessible and changeable. So control space once again on connection, and we are pulling in the Java SQL libraries for that. And if you come up to the top, you see that it added Java SQL connection. And what I've been kind of coaching the people here in class to do is, instead of just using specific libraries, I'm just putting in a wildcard for them, and that way all the SQL stuff that we throw in is just going to work. Not the most memory efficient way to do things, but in terms of learning, it kind of saves us a little bit of hassle, so that's why I did that. All right, next thing that we're going to do is let's make that first combo box. And if you look at the PDF again, you see one is going to be for the drive, well, it should say driver, not drive, and then the database URL. So to do that, first part of it is to declare a new combo box. Now notice, because we're working with array lists here, the different syntax. We're not using the square brackets, we're using like the HTML style brackets to indicate that we're working with array lists as opposed to standard arrays. They do function very much the same way. I mean, really, it's kind of a horse apiece. It's just that there's different capabilities involved with array lists, and that's why we're choosing to do that. Now the combo box does require parentheses at the end, and here's where it kind of gets kind of tricky, because really, you know, we're going to put in these parentheses and then we're going to add stuff to it and split it apart and finally put in a semicolon. So it's going to end up really with a statement like that with a whole bunch of stuff in between here is what happens. So what I'm doing is I'm making space for that stuff in between right now. The first thing that we're going to put in between, and I'm going to tab in one tab stop there, is we are going to add this FX collections library here. And that's the one where we pull in the observable array list. And I just want to make sure that I'm pulling in, I just pull in the generic one here. That also has a set of parentheses that I'm also going to split apart. And that's this bottom one. I'm actually going to tab over one, because here is where we're going to start to list all the items that are going to go inside the array list. Now, since I already have these pre-written, I'm just going to copy and paste them in. Kind of like cheating, I guess, but not really. So those are the options that we need to have. So you notice we're putting in for MySQL, Oracle, and for some sort of Sun Java database thing. And this is combo box. Now the combo box itself does also need a library, so let's go ahead and drop that in. So that's the first combo box. And then we need to put together the second combo box, and seeing that you guys saw the way that I already put this together, I'm going to kind of take a shortcut once again, and I'm just going to do a paste with all the stuff, and then just kind of tab to clean it up as you guys try to hurriedly copy this, I'm sure. I'm just trying to align all my tabs here. And I'm noticing on this one's a little bit cleaner. It has both the parentheses and the semicolon on the same line. I think I'm going to copy that approach and do this. So first one is for the driver, the second one is for the URL, and then that allows us to put in this more complex string here into the structure. Now, inside this class, we've created right now basically the private data fields, the variables that are going to be attached to the object that we're creating. But now we need to have a constructor function that's also going to allow us to do the build. All right, so this is going to take a couple of things in order to get it to work. So the first thing that I'm going to do is decide what structure I'm going to use to build this. Right now, keep in mind that what I'm building, this DB connection pane, extends border pane. So I'm pulling in all those capabilities right now into border pane. But now I have to put stuff into that border pane. So what stuff am I going to put in? How am I going to put it in? And what structure lends itself well? And really, because I have basically what I see here is kind of like some text, a box, text, a box, and this kind of looks like a grid to me. So I'm going to go with the grid pane to contain the contents that are sitting inside this part of the border pane, if that makes sense to you. So we're putting a grid pane inside of a border pane, and that's what I'm going to add here in the constructor. So first, let's begin by actually creating the constructor function. And remember, the constructor function exists by the same name. And I just noticed that I copied the wrong thing. I'm trying to save on typing here, folks. All right. And I actually copied the first 2 lines, which I didn't intend to do, but have to add them anyhow. So let's get that closing curly bracket in there, make a little space in between, and then I'm going to just clean up my tabs. Now this is a setting that we need to put in that allows us now, remember when we're using this word driver, that it allows us to set this to editable. So in other words, that we can change our selection. I mean, that's kind of the simple way to look at it. And that works for me. Since we did that for the driver, we may as well do it for the URL. And then I can go ahead and instantiate my grid pane right here, which of course is going to need a library, so we do a control space at the end of the word, give it a double click, and the library is now added. We're just calling it grid pane. Now remember how a grid pane works. A grid pane basically declares regions of the screen and gives them index values for columns and rows. From our simple little graphic here, and I'm focusing just on the middle section of the screen. Or actually, am I focusing on the whole damn thing? I think I'm focusing on the whole thing. But we're looking at basically, in my eyes, one column, or two columns, excuse me, one column, two columns, and 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. Five rows, right, with the button. I guess I'm thinking of this status label up here as being something that's sitting independent. So, and then if we were to number these, this is column 0, this is column 1. So this is row 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that's going to be important because that's how we're placing things within the structure. So using that as a guide, this little image here as a guide, and maybe, well, I'm just looking here. We're gonna have a label, and then we're gonna have the combo box, right? And actually, it might even make more sense to do all the labels first. So let's do all the labels first, since that's going to be one of these real simple mechanical processes. Since the first label is going into the first position in row 0, column 0, I can do something like this. So I'm going to say grid pane add, instantiate a new label in place, and just say JDBC driver. I'm pulling that right from the example, in position 0, 0. Subsequently, we are going to add labels for the other items, and that is the URL and the username and the password. All of them are in column 0, so the first number is 0, and then for each subsequent row. Okay, and the reason we can instantiate in place is we're not really going to need to manipulate this via code, so we can just create the label right in spot, just like that. It's a nice, simple, eloquent way to do it. All right, now we start looking at the second column, and that's where the combo boxes are and the text boxes. So what we'll do here is I'll create a spot for the driver combo box. So that goes in column 1. That's the second column, but the first row, which is column or row 0. And then we'll do the same thing for the URL. And then we'll also add the text boxes as well. So we got 4 labels, 2 combo boxes, 2 text fields. Now we're also going to throw a button into the mix too. And we did create a button called BTN Connect, so that's the one we'll throw in there. So that'll go in the next position down. So the thing is, though, that one will go in that second column, but if you looked at that PDF, it's all the way off to the right, so I'm going to give it a position alignment to the right. So let's first add it. And then let's put in some alignment information. That's just going to take that horizontal alignment for BTN Connect. We're going to do a horizontal position to the right. That does require a library, so I'm positioning my cursor at the end of the word, control space. Not sure why I did that, but that's NetBeans for you. Couple more little things to do in here. One is the grid pane is all set up, and I'm not sure why this one has a capital G instead of a lowercase g. It should be a lowercase g. Doesn't seem like that though, does it? Well, we'll see how it works when it gets up on the screen. A couple more things that we need to do is take that label that we created up at the top and we're going to put that into this. What in this situation, what is this? Well, the answer to that is the DB connection pane. Remember, DB connection pane is the border pane that we created, and we're going to use the border pane, we're going to use the top section of it to display just the label, or the status label. And that's what we're doing. And that's why I can refer to it as this, because it's really referring to itself. And then we're going to do the same thing by taking the grid pane that we just put together and set that to the center of the border pane. So can you do that with a border pane? Can you just use the parts you want? Absolutely. So I'm just using the top and I'm just using the center. You might argue that, you know, if you're doing all that, why bother using a border pane? I think just because it's easy to do the alignment, basically, using those tools, because it does form the columns, the combination of the grid pane and the border pane together. All right, last thing we need to do in this constructor function or method is to get that button attached to an event handler. So that's what I'm going to do next, is I'm going to take that button, give it a set on action, give it a lambda event handler, and then that's being set up to create, or excuse me, to trigger another method called connectDB. And guess what we're going to do in that one? Kind of what we've been doing in all the other applications is we're going to have a separate method that does the database connection. All right, so what I'm going to do then in position is I will click here, do an Alt-Enter, and that's kind of a cryptic little message. Let's try Control-Space, no suggestions. All right, well what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just manually create that then. I'm not liking the options that it's giving me up on the screen, so why mess with it when I can just type it in. So I'm just going to create a private void method called connectDB. Make sure you name it right. We're not passing anything in. And I'm going to give it a set of curlies here. Now we are going to end up having a try-catch in here for the database stuff. That is required. But first, we're going to set up some variables. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up a couple of string variables, one for the driver and one for the URL, that are both strings, that are basically going to go get the value from the combo box to get the right driver. Then we're going to set one up for the username. And you can guess what that's going to do. It's just going to pull it in right from the form. We're getting the text from the text box, and then we're trimming, which deletes leading and trailing spaces if accidentally entered. And since we're doing it for username, we'll also do it for the password with one little change here. That is that we're going to be instantiating a new string constructor here rather than pulling it in from the form. There's a little bit of a reason for that. All right, next part of this, database connection. And keep in mind that in the previous exercise, we were working with one connection to Chronos, right? So the idea here is that this little thing, this little box that we're creating, is allowing us to connect to different types of databases. Now we don't have those databases to connect to, but if we did, we could actually do that. So that's the kind of fun part of this. So we are going to set up a try catch. So I'm going to just create that structure first. Just so we have that in place. And when you do a catch, you do have to type in the fact that it's an exception. And I usually just name mine like E or X or something like that. Just give it some sort of a variable name. And then what we're going to do is just a couple little commands inside here. So the first one we'll do is we'll do the try, and we're going to put in the class for the driver, and then we're going to do a little console output that only we will see that the driver loaded. Then we're going to initiate our connection. And then notice what this does is instead of having the URL, the username, and the password pre-configured, we are pulling in variables that allow those things to change. So what we would have to do then is make sure that these are correct for connecting to whatever resource we're connecting to. Now, of course, for us, the only one that's going to work is going to be the first one. So you have to remember here that with this combo box that you have the right connection stuff in position. All right, for MySQL, which is the only one that's going to work for us. Then, like we did in our previous applications, I am going to add, okay, grab a little too much code there, little outputs, one for the console and then one for the actual application. So if the connection to the database succeeds, it'll put up a little status message saying database connected. And then it's a good idea to also have some sort of a mechanism to indicate if there's problems. And in this case, we'll output both to the console and to the label called status, and maybe even throw up what the exception error is. And then there's one last little component of this part of the application that we need. And that is to actually have the connection available. And we do that by this series of statements here, or single statement. And that's just returning the connection. All right, so what I'm going to do at this point, I know you guys are busily copying the code, is I'm going to just scroll up to the very top of the application at this point. So for those of you watching the video, you can just double check all your code. So this is what I have going here. And the next section. Finally, our class at the bottom. And that's the entirety of the application. Now, to test it, let's run it and see what happens. Let's see if we can connect to the database. So this is a really simple thing. We're connecting to the database, but we're not actually using it to do anything. But what this should give you an idea is that we can actually, all right, this is not the application we're intending to run, is it? What it's doing is it's running the other application within here. So I'm going to run the file. There we go. And then we would select our driver. So we would select MySQL. We pick our URL, put in our username, type in our password, and with any luck, you get the database connected message. So that's really the entirety of the exercise, is to be able to do that. All right, that ends this video here, and I'll take time to answer your questions here in class.